I want to tell you a story. This is a story about a little girl who grew up in a domestic violence household, losing her mother at 9 years of age and growing up in confusion. This little girl had a resilience that no one had ever seen before. She had big dreams. This little girl, after losing her parents, actually was rehomed to live with her paternal grandparents in a remote country town in northwest New South Wales. Living as a non-Indigenous Australian, she attended school, and this was all she knew. Now that little girl had grown to a 40-year-old woman who was a wife, a mother, and an entrepreneur. She was living the dream. Until one day a package arrived in the mail. Inside that package was a pile of information that would change her life. It was a story of her family history. Not one story, but two. There was a story of her paternal family, which came at no surprise. And then there was a story that was something else. It was her Indigenous story. It was her mother's story about her family heritage. This was something the little girl had never known about, and as a woman, she had to process it. Reading about her mother's family brought a lot of emotions to the stage. She read about her grandfather, who served in the First World War as a soldier. She read of her grandfather, who was one of Australia's first Indigenous soldiers to serve in that war. And she read of his story of coming home with medals and how he returned hurt and deflated and all the emotions that he went through. As she sifted through the paperwork and read of the story, something shifted in this woman. There was a sense of spirit and belonging that she'd never actually felt before. It was a feeling like coming home. Looking at the photos, seeing the images, there was family stories that she was able to understand that had once been unexplained. There was questions that were left unanswered, but looking at the pictures and understanding the stories, it all began to fit, and the puzzle of her new world began to take shape. During this time, she had built herself up without the identity and the assistance of her heritage. And she had worked and built businesses and created opportunities for her family and seen things come forward. But during this discovery, something had to change. She was now Indigenous. And this is something she had to do for herself. So the research began, and she started to understand what she needed to find the answers to life's purpose. She started to connect with those around her and find the questions that she needed answering. Living in Canberra, Australia's capital, she was able to connect with those that she needed to tell her story. And finally, she was able to identify as a proud Kamilaroi woman. And this is my story. I'd like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people where we meet today and pay my respects to the elders past, present and future. I'm blessed because I can see both sides of this nation and I'm able to work in both arenas with great comfort. My dream is to become a voice of my people and see the message go out and educate the world on the messages. There's a great sense of achievement that comes from this process, and there's a feeling of the jigsaw finally being able to fit. Through this journey, I have been able to become strong and proud. The interesting thing is, when people meet me, a lot of them say, "You don't look Aboriginal. You look Greek, maybe Italian, perhaps European." But fellow sisters and brothers of my Indigenous heritage can pick it straight away. They say to me, "What mob are you from?" There's a great sense of relief that comes with that, because it's amazing when you feel that sense of belonging. But it's funny how statements like this can make you feel so differently from each perspective. But to the doubters, I always say, there's a simple explanation. If you drink tea, it's tea. Whether it's strong, black, weak, or white, it's still a cup of tea. The other question people ask me is, what percentage are you? And I say with kindness, we either actually identify fully or not at all. Which leads me to think, which body parts would I label black? Which body parts would I label white? Learning my history has been strong for myself and given me that strength that I've needed. And understanding my culture has given me purpose. There has been tough times along the road where I've had to understand different journeys and have awkward conversations like those annoying percentages. To educate the world on the Indigenous culture and the community and the messages of these people is my life purpose. And I would like to see us all be able to embrace all cultures, especially embrace the love and have the love and the strength within our Indigenous culture and for the first world people, First Nations people. In the past, I've heard stories of, Indigenous people are on welfare, they want the land, they get free money from the government. It's just made me realise how naive I was in growing up and what I actually didn't really know. The key to this is that we actually don't have favourites within this system. And for me, I'm just ambitious and driven anyway. I always strive for what I believe in and do the best that I can. I've been in business since I was 19 years old, and trying to understand these two worlds and how I can become a potential leader within my Indigenous community has been on the forefront of my purpose. So how can I stand up and be noticed? How can I bridge the gap? What can I do to introduce us as an Indigenous community to the world? So I create an Indigenous product range, and I love that range. With that range, we actually introduce raw suppliers that are approved by Indigenous communities. We only work with those that provide economic sustainability back into those communities. The flow of funds back into communities is very important. It actually helps them rely on their own economic independence. In truth, 5% of the true value of the products or the worth of those communities and the resources only feeds back into those communities. We need to change. It's our choice as consumers and business people to make that difference. We need to ask and respect the Indigenous suppliers that we use. On a recent trip to Arnhem Land, I was able to experience this firsthand. I was able to play with the aunties and the sisters when we had our women's business, and were able to create beautiful jewellery from seeds and nuts. And I was able to learn how to basket weave and create this beautiful necklace that I wear today. This necklace took me 6 hours to actually make. Can you imagine how long it takes to make one of the baskets? This is a valuable lesson that I'll be taking home to my multiple networks and to teach them of the understanding of the value of community, and that people pay the correct price for all the resources and products from community, and we're able to feed into economic independence into those communities. We can buy authentically Indigenous products when we search it out. We can ask, are the products socially responsible, to feed back into those communities? Are we helping future generations in those communities? I'd like to leave you with this thought. My dream is to see a lot of our children, all of the children in Australia, learn culture in the school system. Wouldn't it be great if it was part of the actual curriculum in our Australian education system? Imagine if they could learn Indigenous language. This would be a valuable addition that we could pay forward to the next generation. We could also help close the gap and create something for us in the future. We can all learn from each other through economic, language, and healing. If you find this valuable, please follow it up. Talk to your schools, talk to your teachers, talk to your peers. See what we can do about bringing our cultures together. Thank you.